Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham Knight, Knightmare difficulty, no damage walkthrough. We'll be doing Panessa Studios in this video, and alongside this, we'll be doing Mr. Freeze's side mission of the Season of Infamy DLC. So this is very interesting because there's a clear juxtaposition here, because Mr. Freeze's side mission I honestly feel has better storytelling than most of Batman Arkham Knight, and Panessa Studios is filled with storytelling devices and pretty underwhelming scenarios compared to what you're encountering here. So Mr. Freeze's side mission is the great part of this video, but Panessa Studios feels like a weaker part of this video. It's a very interesting dichotomy to experience right there. But Mr. Freeze's side mission is my favorite mission of the Season of Infamy DLC. Not only is it very fun gameplay-wise, and there's 3 Predator encounters, 1 combat encounter, and a massive tank siege, which is a time sequence, but story-wise, this is a well-done piece of content on that level. This provides actual closure to Mr. Freeze. We actually get to see Nora. We get to see a different personality to Batman. We don't hear Joker being annoying whatsoever. Like, if this game did not have Joker, and he wasn't utilized through such a very stupid storytelling device, and he didn't constantly interrupt the seriousness and the actual emotional moments of the game, then this game could have been so much better. And Mr. Freeze's side mission is a clear example of Rocksteady actually caring about what they were actually putting into Batman Arkham Knight. And compared to the other DLC missions that we got for the Season of Infamy DLC, this one's exceptional. It's absolutely fantastic. And one thing that this DLC mission does a lot better than the other missions is that it actually ties into the main story. It includes the militia. It explains that Mr. Freeze was actually sought out by the militia to take on Batman, and when Mr. Freeze refused to take on Batman due to the fact that Batman and Mr. Freeze were allies in Batman Arkham City, they tried to kidnap Nora, which they actually do here. And so this almost leads Freeze to kill Batman, but Batman just stands his ground and he says, "If you trust them, you'll shoot me right here," but he doesn't do it. So the fact that they're actually building upon something that was already established in Batman Arkham City with that whole moment right there is the first step to achieving a properly told story for a DLC mission. And then it gets even better because we get to see Nora, and Nora has been a frozen figure this whole entire time in the Arkham series, but to actually get the chance to hear her and to understand through genuine emotion that she would rather spend the last days of her life outside of that cryo chamber with Freeze and not spend the rest of her life in a frozen prison. Like, she doesn't even express any sort of malice towards Freeze. She doesn't hate Freeze whatsoever for actually freezing her, for actually like trying to find this chance to cure her. You can clearly see the love between Nora and Freeze when she exits that cryo chamber and she's talking with him. Like, just, you can tell that they're trying to give payoff to people who were invested in Freeze in the Arkham series, and they're actually trying to conclude his arc in this DLC right here. And this is so different because normally in Batman media, you never get this kind of closure with heroes or villains. Their arcs are just prolonged for a very long time until eventually the series ends, and it ends on a cliffhanger. But this is different. The fact that they're actually taking the time to conclude an anti-villain's arc right here is a perfect payoff to your investment in the Batman Arkham brand if you've actually been invested in Freeze and Nora as well. And also, I mentioned that the militia play a role in this DLC mission right here. The militia are your primary enemy throughout the entirety of Batman Arkham Knight's main story. And for them to actually have some relevance in this DLC side mission makes this side mission a lot better than the previous side missions that were included as part of this DLC. This is the only side mission of the DLC that actually has relevance to the main story. Like, the amount of care displayed by Rocksteady in this mission should have been displayed in other parts of the game as well. But the side missions that you deal with in Batman Arkham Knight don't feel up to the same kind of quality as this DLC mission with Mr. Freeze. And the same can be said with the main story of Batman Arkham Knight as well. I've already talked a lot about the problems with Batman Arkham Knight's main story, and I'll still be continuing to talk about more in the later videos. But, you know, there's always that controversy with Batman Arkham Knight's main story, and just parts of it that don't make any sense, like what I've just discussed with Joker, or what I've just discussed with the writing of certain characters, just the way they deliver certain lines. It doesn't feel right, yet there isn't a single moment in this side mission where I feel like such inconsistency should be noted because they aren't present. Like the side mission gets so much right compared to the main story of Batman Arkham Knight. Like, this definitely deserves a lot of praise. I mean, people love this side mission, and I 100% agree with them. But I just feel like the things I like about this side mission are of a greater degree compared to what people actually like about this mission. And, you know, the gameplay part of it, there are 2 Predator encounters, 1 combat encounter and the Batmobile section, which I've already explained. And I've just done the first Predator encounter, which I always plant explosive gel on one of the ladders, and then I use the other ladder to actually knock off the enemies when I use the dive bomb. And then we have that combat encounter, which is very simple. And then we have this Predator encounter, which doesn't feel as good as I'd like. And I don't feel like there's a lot of options at your disposal with this particular Predator encounter, given the choice of environment they decided to favor. And there are some weird inconsistencies with the enemies in this part. So that sniper I just took out, the enemies that are climbing the ladder directly below me, when they're in the middle of that animation, somehow they can spot the sniper's body, and so it causes them to go into an alert status. But right now, the enemies don't seem to be in an alert status right now because the guys on the ladder didn't see the body. So you can see right here, the enemies are calm. I mean, I do the knockout smash just then because I wanted to replicate that same situation that would have occurred had the body been discovered just through some weird AI means. So I do that, and I'm just going to use batarangs against most of these enemies because without floor grates, without vents, without a lot of ways to use dive bombing to my advantage, like, this section doesn't offer a lot of ways to be very strategic with the enemies. I mean, you can probably use your disruptor on the medics pack, or you can probably use a disruptor on other things, but that's really it. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using smoke pellets, I'm going to be using the fear takedown, and I'll also be using the multi-batarang, which I don't think I've talked about yet in Batman Arkham Knight. So in Batman Arkham City, you did not have the ability to use the multi-batarang when you were aiming it. You could not select multi-batarangs from your equipment menu. In Batman Arkham Origins, they fixed this. So I think in Batman Arkham Origins, you had to actually select the multi-batarangs, or it works the same way as Batman Arkham Knight, where you equip your batarang, so while you're aiming, you press R1 to equip multiple batarangs. Or I think it's R2, I'm not sure what the button input is in Batman Arkham Origins for equipping multi-batarangs. But it's cool that Batman Arkham Knight decided to take a cue from Batman Arkham Origins and reintroduce multi-batarangs again. It just helps in dealing with a lot of these scenarios where the enemies are so close to each other. And those times where you're trying to drop near enemies and Batman does the wrong animation, or he jumps in a way where he's most likely going to get spotted by the enemies, you can completely avoid that by using the batarangs. And I don't know why there's no kind of tutorial that indicates you can use multi-batarangs. You sort of just stumble upon the multi-batarangs accidentally if you just happen to look at the bottom right of your screen while aiming the batarang. But there are a couple of situations in this Predator encounter that definitely warrant the use of multi-batarangs. And I had to restart this encounter so many times to actually understand what I was supposed to do, but I just couldn't get a consistent strategy for this. But as long as you isolate the enemies accordingly and use your batarangs to knock them over, or try to get experimental with other mechanics, or even using your disruptor, you should be fine. And now we have this exchange of dialogue between Batman and Nora. Like, again, it feels so refreshing to finally hear Nora's voice, and you can actually hear the genuine emotion coming out of her. Like, this is the first time we're being introduced to her, and her voice acting, her writing, her genuine emotions expressed. You actually feel connected to her in this moment, even though this is your first time actually seeing her. And again, she does a perfect job at serving her role as being closure for Victor Freeze's arc. And see, like, don't you see, I don't want saving, not anymore. Because she doesn't want to live a miserable existence, just trying to fight time, just trying to fight death. You know, like, people say life is worth living, like, life is a lot better than death, but there are those situations where death just welcomes you with open arms. unlike life. And Nora just doesn't want to live the rest of her life in a miserable existence. She wants to pass away with Freeze, knowing that they loved each other till the end, knowing that bond has never been broken. And that is just a great way to close Freeze's arc. But we now have this moment right here where we're trying to drive to Freeze, given that the cryo generator exploded, creating patches of ice that we can actually drive on. And I will say, though, it does seem a little strange that Batman would take Nora with him, but I'm guessing he understands that Nora doesn't have much time to live, and she's not afraid of death. So that's why he's taking her with him. And I'm guessing in some cases, Batman understands Nora's feelings, and that she wouldn't want to be sitting on the sidelines for this. So that right there is an interesting choice for character development right there. But aside from that, we now have this combat encounter right here, so I'm going to be using the EMP to my advantage. So a fully charged EMP will disable multiple drones, and it stuns them for a very long time. So you can use this to your advantage to build up more secondary energy, and then use the EMP again in case you find yourself surrounded, because it is very easy to take damage on this part. There are so many drones. And the final part is pretty tricky because there's going to be an onslaught of drones, and you're on a timer, and you just have to wait until Freeze detonates the generator so that he can take out all the drones. But we've just done that. Make sure you have full energy on your Batmobile, and prepare for the final siege. So this is where you're going to get surrounded on all sides, and this is where the EMP is really going to come in handy. So if you're dealing with any heavy drones, like for instance the Diamondback or the Twin Rattler, you'll have to hit these drones multiple times with the 60mm cannon. And I don't know if you can still shoot the little light on their body, even when they're under the influence of the EMP. Like, the lights are currently off, so I don't know if the weak spot's currently active for you to shoot with your Vulcan gun. But if you can shoot the weak spots on these enemies, even when they're EMP'd, that'd be very helpful in speeding up the encounter. But when you have only 1 or 2 bars of EMP charges, the enemies are not stunned for long. If you have a full 4 bars with your EMP, they'll be stunned for a very long duration. And we're nearing the end of the fight right now, when Batman is repeatedly calling out to Victor and he's not answering. And then this is when he decides to detonate the cryo generator, and that is the end of this encounter. And we will actually get proper closure to Victor in this moment right here. And I just love these final words of the DLC. Like, she's talking with Freeze, and Freeze is saying, "I don't want you to die, Nora." And she says, "Then let me live." And then he acknowledges the fact that they don't have much time left. She does say, and it is the truth for sure, "Time has never been on our side, Victor." Like, what wonderful concluding remarks for this DLC. Like, why couldn't the team that wrote this DLC write the full game? It really feels like some other team wrote the main story for Batman Arkham Knight, and they felt like the B team. But that team who wrote Mr. Freeze's side mission feels like the A team. They should have been the ones writing the entirety of Batman Arkham Knight's story. And through this unfortunate circumstance, the rest of the game just suffers. And we're now doing the main story, so we're doing Panessa Studios, so we're trying to stop Harley Quinn from stealing the infected Jokers. Really, this feels more like a distraction from the main story than something that actually feels like a part of the main story, because these Jokers and Harley Quinn don't serve any purpose to the main story of Batman Arkham Knight. You could have easily told the rest of Batman Arkham Knight's story without this part of the game. And ironically, I do love the actual environment. The actual environment takes advantage of the graphics engine that Rocksteady used for this game wonderfully. And it has actual character to it compared to later parts of the game where, you know, a lot of the environments feel kind of the same, and they don't ever have any moments that feel like they demonstrate a unique identity present within that area. But Panessa Studios feels like a huge exception in that case, with its choice of color palette, with its choice of setting, with its choice of like theatricality. Like, it's a literal movie studio. And isn't it funny that, you know, like, the Joker is someone who favors the theatricality. You know, he likes the idea of being flashy and showy. And Batman sets up his base in Panessa Studios. Even Harley Quinn acknowledges this. I wonder what they were trying to go for with that as well. Did they mean for Batman to coincidentally favor a base that Joker would have to externalize his feelings of loss towards the Joker. Almost like in a sense, he's attached to the Joker. So when he's attached to the Joker, it's also represented in this whole idea of being attached to a setting that the Joker would have most likely been in. Or is it just there as payoff to the whole idea of Batman and Joker being two sides of the same coin? Because this is often a running theme you see for a lot of Batman media. Whatever your cup of tea, I just think it's mainly for that idea, not really something that serves a story purpose, if you ask me. But we're being introduced to a new gadget that you haven't seen me use a lot, and it is the voice synthesizer. I mean, I think I have used it occasionally in certain parts of this game on New Game Plus, but if you're skilled at the Predator encounters, you don't need the voice synthesizer, and oftentimes you're spending a lot of time waiting when you're trying to use the voice synthesizer, because if you do lock onto a guy and then you designate him to go to an object that's quite far away, you're at the mercy of his pathing. You know, sometimes he'll be a little bit fast, other times he'll be a little bit slow. You know, it's a waste of time. And I'm kind of the mindset of being a bit fast with these Arkham games, because I see Batman Arkham videos doing all these crazy strategies that really showcase professional play that I just want to do the same as well. But the voice synthesizer, it's a pretty simple device to use. You target an enemy, he becomes logged into the voice synthesizer, and then you have to target another object for him to investigate. It doesn't have to be an object, though. You can just indicate any part of the floor, or a wall, or like a sentry gun, a turret, like anything pretty much that is indicated in detective vision. And he will go there, and you can use this as a chance to take him out using guerrilla tactics. Eventually, if you use the voice synthesizer too much, the enemies will get wise to your tactics, and they'll switch channels so that they will not hear any of the voices generated by the voice synthesizer. So it doesn't make it as good as the sonic batarang, but the voice synthesizer is more useful in allowing you to select specific targets, rather than with the sonic batarang where it was random. Here is some weird programming here. So they are trying to introduce you to the voice synthesizer mechanic right over here, yet I was just using it previously as if they wanted you to use it there. So it almost gives the impression that the penalty system that Harley Quinn enabled on me to stop me from using the voice synthesizer is meaningless right over here, and you can even hear her say, "Stop listening to me." But the enemies are still listening to me when I use the voice synthesizer anyway. But right here, when I use the voice synthesizer on one of these three enemies, Harley Quinn's penalty system enables, and so I'm unable to use the voice synthesizer again. So I'm going to have to improvise right here by using the remote hacking device and the smoke pellet. I'm going to use the remote hacking device to blind one of the turrets, and then as soon as I get an opening, I'm going to deploy my smoke pellet and do a fear takedown on these two enemies. And this will be the end of this Predator encounter. But you see right there how the reticle is orange? It means I can't use the voice synthesizer. Because you see right there, she's saying, "Stop listening to me," when I was using the voice synthesizer on one of these three enemies as part of the tutorial. So that is what you're going to have to adapt to when using the voice synthesizer. And I don't know how to counteract this whole dynamic nature to the enemies where they adapt to the voice synthesizer. I don't know if you have to continually use it on different items, or if it's just a preset limit, like you can only use it twice and then the penalty system enables. That I'm kind of unsure of with the voice synthesizer. But right here, here's the skill tree system, and you'll notice I have a lot of Wayne Tech points because I haven't been finding the need to purchase anything. So it's pretty absurd that I have this many Wayne Tech points. So yeah, I've missed out on so many upgrades that I really should have had, but I was just ignoring it because I thought some of the upgrades that the game wanted me to get were pointless, like the health upgrades. But there we go, I've used all of my Wayne Tech points to purchase every single upgrade. I still don't know why it says 12 out of 13 for that gadget skill upgrade, even though I purchased everything there. Am I missing something? I don't know what that's about. And here's this whole moment right here where you're forced to go through another Joker sequence when you're in this elevator. And Joker is saying that during the events of Arkham City, at the end of the game, when you didn't share your cure with me, that was you saying, "I want you dead." So Joker's twisting the facts right here in order to generate this scenario where he actually won against Batman in that moment. Maybe it was true, I don't know. But Joker was the one that stabbed Batman in the shoulder, and that stopped Batman from actually giving Joker the cure, so it's his fault. not Batman's fault, so why is he twisting the events like that? That doesn't make any sense. Or maybe it does, because if Joker is part of Batman now, he actually feels what Batman feels, and so he actually knows about Batman's secret guild, and therefore he's plucking at that string in order to twist the events to make it seem like he won during the events of Batman Arkham City. And also, it is kind of an interesting perspective that Batman actually saying that he was going to share the cure was a lie in order to cover up an insecurity that he was going against his moral code. But it never really came across as such when I was looking through that ending for Batman Arkham City. And, you know, in Batman Arkham Knight, it's never really touched upon very well, aside from that random Joker scene we got in the elevator, and it's never mentioned again. So, yeah, what is the whole point of that? I don't know. But we have just done this combat encounter with Robin, and I'm just showing this for the heck of it, because when you were trying to get into that room where the Riddler trophy was, where did you think this electricity for your Batarang was going to be? Did you really expect it to be up there, where the electricity was that obscure and badly textured? That particular Riddler challenge proved vexing until I actually looked up what I was supposed to do, and I don't know how I managed to figure it out last time, the first time I solved that Riddler challenge, but I imagine you guys were equally as stumped as I was when wondering how you were supposed to get into that room where the Riddler trophy was, because that electricity should have been better textured. It was better textured in Batman Arkham City and Arkham Origins when you actually saw the blue electricity and it really stood out from the environment, but that doesn't stand out in any sort of way. And yeah, that is a really, really stupid puzzle, if you ask me, with that poorly textured electricity. But this is where we're getting introduced to the dual team takedown mechanic in Predator encounters. So with minigunners, when you're with Robin, and this is really the only time we'll ever get the chance to do this in the main story unless you go into the challenge mode, if you get behind a minigunner and press triangle, Robin will teleport to you, or Batman will teleport to you, and you will instantly take him out and do a loud takedown. Pretty cool, but it's a minor mechanic, and I have to say, guys, the Predator encounters in the main story don't feel as good as the Predator encounters you get in the side missions. I feel like the Predator encounters that you get in the main story, you don't deal with as many enemies or an interesting variety of enemy types compared to the side missions, like Two-Face's side mission, Mr. Freeze's side mission. Those two missions feature some very interesting arrangement of enemies and interesting environments. I mean, I say interesting, I mean, it's really the boat from Mr. Freeze's side mission that was actually intriguing compared to the other one I did in this side mission. But Two-Face's Predator encounters were great with the unique choice of environment, but these main story encounters, I don't feel like there's any real incentive to get creative with them. It's very easy to isolate the enemies, and they're pretty simple to approach. But I was trying to do this Predator encounter one particular way, very similar to Batman Arkham videos, but it just wasn't working, so I just decided to do it this way, and it's a lot better. But there are two phases to this Predator encounter. So when we get rid of this guy right here, a cutscene will play and we'll get a checkpoint. And I messed up on both parts of this Predator encounter because I was just being very stupid when I should have just been a very thoughtful Predator and actually thought about what I was doing rather than trying to get very creative through very fun strategies. But right here, this second phase, you can get rid of one of the guys using an inverted takedown. And watch this. So I do the inverted takedown right here. If this was any other Arkham game, I would have been spotted. But with Arkham Knight, when you do inverted takedowns, the enemies don't respond to you when they see you dropping down from the vantage point. So I don't know what they did with the programming of the enemies or what they changed with the engine to cause that to be a thing. But it's pretty funny how inverted takedowns practically make you invisible to the enemies during the entire animation now. I wonder why they did that. That's very odd. But also, there is another mechanic in this Predator encounter. You see on the top left those three bat symbols? Well, if I look at an enemy and press L1, I can call my AI partner to instantly take down the enemy using a silent takedown, which is actually a knockdown smash, but it's classed as a silent takedown because it doesn't make any noise. I don't use that mechanic because I don't really get into a lot of situations where the enemies isolate themselves. And also, I just use the voice synthesizer on that minigunner. The voice synthesizer is pretty useful against the minigunners. If you use it alongside the disruptor, you disrupt a object in the environment, and then you lure him using the voice synthesizer, and it will instantly take him out. And also, this is weird. I throw my freeze blast, but this guy is delayed with actually feeling the effects of the freeze blast, because watch this. He's frozen. What happened? Like, I was getting some weird moments during Panessa Studios where the game had some weird hiccups, and I do showcase some of this in the blooper section, so can't wait to show you those moments. But he's frozen for the time being, but he gets out pretty quickly, so I'm just waiting for these guys to separate so I can take him out. And here's my chance. And this was actually kind of risky, because if that guy went around the corner, I was dead. But he gets stuck on this corner somehow. Like, again, more unusual behavior I was experiencing in Panessa Studios. And I instead opt to do the silent takedown on this guy. And I'm lucky that this guy didn't shoot me immediately, because the back claw is the perfect way to stop enemies from instantly shooting you. The game recommends you use the batarang in order to stop enemies from shooting you, but the batarang is way too slow. And also, on this game, and this is only on this game, there are occasionally moments where the game will go into slow motion when an enemy spots you in these predator encounters, and the game will tell you to use a batarang to stop the enemy from shooting you, but the mechanic is inconsistent. I don't know how to get it where you get the slow motion consistently when an enemy spots you, but even though the slow motion is a thing, it really doesn't make that much of a difference unless you use the bat claw in order to stop the enemy from shooting you. That's the one advantage provided by the slow motion, but again, it's inconsistent, and I don't know how to consistently trigger the slow motion. I don't know if it's tailored to the enemies being off camera. I don't know if it's tailored to some specific state Batman is supposed to be in. It's very odd. But we now have to deal with Albert King in a pretty uninspired boss fight. And it's also a ludonarrative dissonance, because you've seen Batman take on Titan henchmen in Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City, and he's even dealt with enforcers in Batman Arkham Origins. He's beat down on them so many times, and then he's eventually taken them out. And Albert King is shorter than those enemies, yet for some reason, he is completely immune to Batman's attacks. He doesn't register any kind of flinch animation. It's like Batman's punching blubber. So why is this kind of ludonarrative dissonance being displayed with Albert King? And it's only being displayed like this to probably give some kind of excuse for a boss fight, when all this boss fight is just what you did with Killer Croc. So they pretty much did a reskin of the Albert King fight with Killer Croc by having you fill up the dual team takedown bar and then doing the dual team takedown on Albert King or on Killer Croc. And you could easily finish this guy off if the game had any sort of consistency. I mean, Batman finished off Titan henchmen a lot faster than what he did against Albert King. The Titan henchmen were way larger than Albert King, and they had a lot of muscle mass to them. The Titan gave him that, but for some reason, this guy is apparently a lot more resilient than the Titan henchman, even though the guy is a short stuff. That's what he is. So why have they favored this? Just why? Why have they decided to make Batman seem like a weakling when he can't even deal with a short stack like Albert King, when he took down Titan henchmen easily in Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, and he took down enforcers properly in Batman Arkham Origins? Aside from what I've just explained with the boss fight aspect, how they had to create some kind of excuse for a boss fight. That's definitely something that doesn't sit right with me, and it's a pretty lame boss fight. It's interesting your first time because you're not thinking about it, but when you look at it as a whole, it is a pretty uninspired fight. The boss fights in Batman Arkham Knight are one of the most disappointing aspects of Batman Arkham Knight. I do agree with Seraphim17 on that. I mean, some of them are decent, but for the most part, they are pretty underwhelming compared to the boss fights in Arkham City and Arkham Origins, and I'm not even including Arkham Asylum, because Arkham Asylum has some pretty shit fights if you actually see my walkthrough of that game. Like, the boss fights in Arkham Asylum are one of the weaker points in Batman Arkham Asylum that they did fix a little bit more in Batman Arkham City, aside from Solomon Grundy. Solomon Grundy was equally as shit as some of the other bosses you encountered in Batman Arkham Asylum. But Batman Arkham Asylum, Bane was just a reskin of a Titan henchman. Scarecrow was not really a boss. Killer Croc was pretty cool, even though he's not really a boss fight. He's an environmental hazard, but a scary environmental hazard. Poison Ivy was shit. It was a combination of free flow and anti-free flow elements done poorly. Joker as a final boss fight was okay, but underwhelming. Yeah, that game has some pretty shit boss fights, but this game, I would almost say the bosses are on an equal level with Arkham Asylum. I mean, City and Origins definitely have the better boss fights of the bunch. But that's all I'm going to say about that particular tangent. And we have just finished off Albert King in this very contrived boss fight. And this boss fight that just showcases a narrative dissonance with Batman and his physical capabilities. And now we're going to make our way over to Johnny Charisma in another moment that doesn't make any sense. So I'm guessing the whole moment where Batman is seeing Joker in place of Charisma and he's saying the lines he's saying, those lines aren't actually heard by Robin, because that is a little confusing. Like, what exactly is Robin hearing when Johnny's actually singing? Is he actually hearing what Johnny wants to hear, or is he hearing what Joker's actually saying? It's never conveyed properly in this whole moment right here. But the gist of this is very simple. There are 5 bombs scattered around the area, and we, as Robin, need to disable the bombs while Johnny is busy singing to Batman. And Johnny's field of view is represented by a light that is emitting from the stage. And if you step into that light, you will fail. So you've got to make sure that when you're disabling these bombs, that you time it just right where he won't be able to spot you instantly. Some of the bombs you can get behind, like this one. And regardless of where the light's on you, Johnny will never be able to see you because you're right behind the bomb. You can also use the stage to your advantage to get to these bombs quickly by standing on the part of the stage directly behind Johnny and using the rotation in order to get to these bombs quickly. But this is the last bomb, and all you need to do right now is get behind Johnny and press triangle, and that will be the end of this encounter, this rather confusing encounter that doesn't make any sense from Robin's perspective. And we're now going to move on to this part right here, where we just have to deal with Harley and her men. So you need to get inside of this grate and equip the voice synthesizer to get this thug to open the door. And then it cues a whole cutscene where Robin is going to greet Harley, and then you have to take her down. So once you've done that, you've just got to deal with the rest of Harley's men, and there's an opportunity to use some bots to your advantage in order to get rid of the enemies quickly, and there are 2 heavies, so you need to get rid of them by doing takedowns or just doing beatdowns. The bot is also very helpful. You can actually use the bots to break through defenses. So like if you have a bot, you'll be able to hit through stun rods, you can hit through shields, you can hit through heavies. Yeah, it's pretty much on par with that of the shock gloves from Batman Arkham Origins, only the bot has some really cool advantages. I think more so than the shock gloves from Batman Arkham Origins. Because one thing I forgot to mention about the bots is when you do a ground takedown on an enemy, when you have the bot, the takedown is instant. The moment you land on an enemy to do the ground finish, you just instantly take him out. And you saw it just then. That was so cool. This is one of my favorite features with the bot, because the amount of times in the previous Arkham games where the enemies would be floored and you had no choice but to do the ground takedown, and the animation was very slow. Yeah, that was really bad in those games, but not here. The bot just really, really ups the ante on the combat, and it's so fun to use. But we now have a couple of bloopers, so that right there is a problem with the grapple where you end up accidentally grappling in front of an enemy because of your placement, and that right there, why did the wire walk fail? And then this right here is some very clunky detection with the grapple. Like, the grapple is great, I love it, but the times when it doesn't work to your intention, and you instead grapple onto pieces of geometry like that, and I can't go anywhere, and I end up grappling somewhere else and I get spotted, yeah, that is definitely a problem I was encountering a lot with this particular Predator encounter. And then this. So this is one of those few times where the ladders don't work in allowing you to knock off the enemies, because apparently this ladder is positioned in such a way where instead of falling, it just triggers a lot of ragdoll physics with these enemies. And so because I'm not able to finish them off, I have to use the ground finish. But this proves to be a problem, because you see that guy who's furthest away? He ends up spotting me out of nowhere somehow, because this guy ends up seeing me. And he's using a shotgun, and it has that much range. Are you serious? And then we have a couple of moments here where I'm trying to do the drop attack, but for some reason Batman jumps. And so I end up getting spotted by one of these enemies right over here because he failed to do a simple drop attack. And then for this blooper, I go into X2 combo by doing this Fear Takedown, and because there's no real distinction between Combat and Predator, it thinks I want to do the quick Batarang, because I was trying to aim my Smoke Pellet, but because I was in X2, it prioritized the quick Batarang, rather than allowing me to aim my Smoke Pellet, and so I just wasted time just fiddling around with gadgets, and then I took damage, and then this right here, I took fall damage from the Gatling Gunner, because he landed right on top of me, and I took a small amount of damage, which seems like very little, and I really shouldn't be thinking anything of it, but again, it's a no damage walkthrough, so I can't have that. And then that right there, I ended up going into X1 combo, and this is a great example of one of my main problems with the Arkham games, where you build up combo, but you have to build your combo up to X2 in order to get Batman to do the long-range attacks. If you're on X1, or you don't have any combo at all, Batman never does his long-range attacks, and so you end up messing up your combo. And it's one of the dumbest design choices with the Batman Arkham games, and I've never appreciated it because the amount of times you just lose your combo out of nowhere and you can't do any of the long-range attacks, and so you're just hitting thin air because Batman refuses to do what you want him to do. It is a very vexing issue with the games, and that's all I have to say about that. That is the end of Panessa Studios. Stay tuned for the future videos. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.